Hey guys, I'm back with another talking point video. This one's a pretty good one. It's all about the reasons why we try not to clip the ATC to our belay loop and our backup to our leg loop anymore. So I'm going to be hanging out in crotch view, talking about what you guys talking about how that's set up, and then a more modern way to set it up, and then I'm going to talk pros and cons about each. So here's the first most common setup: just ATC on the belay loop, locking carabiner. I'm sure most of you guys learned on this at some point, and I originally learned rappelling like this. I can pull up rope and engage my brake hand and slide down and all that. This is one of the least used techniques in my quiver, mostly because if I let go with this hand or if I need to go hands-free, then I have nothing stopping the brake. So a lot of people will draw the analogy of this being the same as soloing, because if you make that one mistake, then you're sailing downhill. So for a long time, this was all that you had for rappelling when they finally invented plates. And what people came up with is clipping a third hand type material into the leg loop. And then you do, there's any number of friction hitches you can use for this. I use an auto block personally. And when I pull that up, you can see how the auto block engages on the rope, and then my ATC is up here actually holding me. So this friction hitch doesn't have to be super strong. All that it needs to do is apply the minimal amount of friction needed to pinch the rope right here, and then also orient the brake strands in the brake position. And it's easy enough to dislodge it because I can push it down and then slide down and control the speed that way. So right here, this is the common setup right now. You got the leg loop here clipped with an auto block. And really all this is doing is just orienting the brake strand and brake position and applying the minimal amount of friction needed to keep the rope from sliding through the ATC. So in this orientation, this is considered a hands-free backup. If I was doing something real fast with my hands, I would take the hands off. If I was going for a larger amount of time, I would take all four strands and tie a big knot right here. So that way, if this thing does slip, then this will jam up in that friction hitch. But other than that, really, this is a pretty okay setup. And I still use this one a fair amount while climbing. I'll talk about that later. A common downside to this system is people forget that you have to clip this to your leg loop, and they'll clip both the ATC and the third hand off their belay loop. What that does is it causes this thing to butt up against the ATC. Oh, I can get it to work. Hang on. Oof. And if I really lean back, you can see how it's starting to slip through. Oh, there it goes. So what happens is the ATC ends up mining the friction hitch. Whatever friction hitch you use, it'll fail on all three of the major ones. So that's why we want to have some form of separation between the ATC and my third hand backup right there. So if you are going to use this technique, you better make sure that you have enough separation for this to actually work up and bite on the rope. So a large pitfall to this system is if I lift my leg up and then I can get this to bite into the ATC, then I can start sliding down. And there are other ways you can do that too. Sometimes, depending on your material, if it's longer or shorter or whatever, even just by turning your body enough, you can get... Okay, man, it's not working on this one. I got lucky, but if you turn your body, a lot of times you can actually cause this thing to butt up against the ATC, and then that'll cause slippage. Another huge argument is, in the climbing world, people like to say that if a rock hits your head and you get knocked out, right? So in the climbing world, if I'm sitting in my harness and a rock falls down and knocks me out, I'm going to flip over. That's like the same for everyone. And I will say, the minute you flip over, this is going to jam into here and you're going to sail down. So there is absolutely no buffer if you're going to do this with the possibility of getting knocked out. I guess you could call this the new age thing, even though people have been doing it for quite a while, is passing some sort of material through your hard points or your belay loop. In this case, I'm going to choose this Repel extension. I have a video that talks all about different Repel extensions and their pros and cons. So I can put my ATC up in that higher point and then clip my third hand to my belay loop. So there we go. And then on another point is I actually get this extra clip-in part to clip to an anchor or something like that. So that way if I'm doing a multi-pitch Repel, I can go anchor to anchor and have a built-in sense right there. But for now, I'm going to clip this back. So yeah, this right here is the new setup, extended Repel, third hand right here. This allows for a number of good things. One is my third hand can go on my belay loop, which is an actual rated part of my harness, right? So I guess another example is if this ATC explodes, which it's not going to do, but if this explodes and it's on your leg loop, then you're definitely going to flip over. Maybe the leg loop will come undone, you know, any number of things. In this situation, if this thing explodes, I at least have this full-on backup on my belay loop. So we know that the ATC is not going to explode on us, but if people were to rig it a wrong way, like this one's pretty common, for example, right? And then if I sit back, all of a sudden, you know, that strand is now out of my ATC. And instead of my third hand being on my leg loop where all my weight is and I flip over or whatever, it's on my belay loop now. So I actually have a central part of my harness that I can balance on, and then I'll notice that at some point. If the point of the third hand is to actually back up your belay device, you're going to want it on the belay loop of the harness, so that way it can actually hold your weight to some extent. Okay, so I showed you guys all the systems. I showed you putting the ATC on the belay loop, putting the backup on the leg loop, and then extending the ATC out. So let's talk pros and cons now. I personally use all three of those in my guiding and in my work and all that. They just come in different places. The easy one is if I'm on a multi-pitch climb, I will pretty much always extend my Repel. And a few reasons for that. One, the biggest one is that it comes with its own attachment to the anchor. So if I use a double length sling, or more commonly nowadays I'm using like connect adjust or something like that, I have a connection to the anchor. So I can clip in and then I can rig up my Repel, put the ATC on the extension, and then third hand on that, and then Repel down. And it's also pretty common, right? Like I'm rappelling a few hundred feet off the deck, so I want to have a bit of extra security. Nothing really sucks more than getting to the end of your ropes and having just like no knots, and then you have to hold on with your hand while you figure out where the anchor is. And also it's usually on more blocky terrain where I'm going to have to actually go hands-free to pull in some ropes or do whatever in order to just organize the Repel. So if you're the first person going down, then it's very useful. On multi-pitch terrain, I'm pretty much always using a third hand, again for those same reasons, like going hands-free to organize the rope. The first person down always has to organize the rope and do usual other stuff like find the anchors. Sometimes you don't know where you're going, so it's nice to have those backups in place in order to get down as safe as you can. Rappelling is already dangerous enough. And so that's pretty much the majority of the work I do is in the multi-pitch terrain and big alpine environments where I'm going to extend my Repel. I may mess around with the different types of extensions, but there's always some form of extension in there, and my backup is pretty much always on my belay loop. When I move away from that is in the single pitch environment. So if I am on a small little like 10-meter rock climb, like 30 feet or something, and I can see from my anchor to the ground, maybe I'm going up there to clean the anchor or whatever because we're moving to a new spot, then I'll I'll thread the rope through the chains, bring it down to the ground, and I have everything I need. But if I can see that it's a clean throw to the ground, there's nothing to mess with on the way down, and I just need to clip in and zip down, I may just use my ATC and a locker on my belay loop with no backup, just because I'm quickly getting down. Short little rappels and very obvious. Maybe I can even call down below for my other instructor to give me a firefighter's belay. That's another option, right? That's still a backup. And if I know the system's totally closed, like both ends are on the ground, and all I have to do is quickly zip down. So that's kind of the time when I'll use an ATC without third hand backup just to get down to the ground. Now I may use the ATC on the belay loop and the third hand on the leg loop in very specific circumstances. Again, going back to that like single pitch rappel, but I know I have to do something weird like clean draws on the way down, or if the rope is hung up on a ledge and I may need both my hands to pull it out and organize it so that way I can rappel. There's also other weird factors like if the rope is wet or if the rope is icy, and I want to have more security going down. I can use an ATC and my third hand with the third hand on the leg loop, just to add a bit more security. If it's wet, it's been a long day, I'm tired, anything like that. It just when I can't really fully justify having a full extension, but I want a bit more security than just solo hands only on the ATC. There's a progression and there's a place for all of them. I'd say a good go-to is start with fundamentally always backing up your rappels. And the more experience you gain, the more you'll understand kind of like here or there where you can work around that guideline. And when I'm in the multi-pitch environment, I would say just like rule of thumb there, just go with rappel extension, third hand on your belay loop, do the full mile even for just a 2-pitch climb, because just having the full infrastructure there to back you up in case you have to do something weird, especially if you have to clip to an anchor halfway down. You have that extension right there. It's ready to go. You can clip into the anchor. You can be completely separated from the rope, which is nice for rappelling, and it just will ultimately help you move faster going down the climb. And that can work for a 2-pitch climb. That can work all the way up to a 17-pitch climb. I just, on any real multi-pitch situation, I will have a rappel extension, and that could be in the form of a personal anchor or anything on my harness. It can be kind of amazing how complex something as simple as a third hand can be with the amount of friction you have versus you don't have, amount of wraps, the diameter of the third hand material versus the diameter of your rope, how worn in your ATC is, the carabiner that is with your ATC, how worn in the rope is. So a lot of these can be weird factors in how much friction versus how little friction. Really the best thing you can do is just hire someone to, or hire someone or find someone that you can use as a mentor to work through those different situations. And it's an interestingly dangerous thing that in the world of climbing it's like rappelling is just there to help us get down, but it's can be the most dangerous part of the climb. So it's something that you got to take seriously and think about your steps, have those guidelines to start off with, and then as you gain experience you can move into less guidelines and more decision-based terrain options. So thanks guys for watching. This is a video I wanted to make for quite a while. Good talking point right there. And I'm sure that there's some people that feel differently and other people that would like to add in. So that's what the comment section is all about. I'd like to hear what you guys think. And thanks for watching. And I'll see you guys in the next one. View from the bivy sack.